everyone. I know it's getting late in the evening, and I hope you will have the energy to listen to what I would like to share with you on the subjects that we've already heard some words about. But before I start, when Professor Patterson called me to invite me to speak tonight, I quickly accepted for many reasons. But it reminded me of the occasion when someone else was invited to speak and the man accepted. And then the inviter said to the man, by the way, you will only have 5 minutes to speak. And the man said, well, how can I possibly tell everything I know on the subject in 5 minutes? And the answer was, speak slowly. Well, let me get to my remarks. I'm very, very honored to be with you this evening and to be part of the inaugural presentation of the Tran Tong Reconciliation Prize. We know that the two recipients are highly deserving individuals. One a human rights champion and the other a president, both of whom seek to reconcile Burma's long history of oppression with a just rule of law for the people of Burma. As we have heard, Tran Tong was a majestic leader and a victor, but at the height of his power, he abdicated his throne. He gave up power to pursue his vision of a country dedicated to reconciliation and peace. His example calls to mind George Washington, who also gave up power in service for a higher vision. When a vanquished King George III of England asked the American painter Benjamin West what Washington would do after winning democracy and freedom and independence, West replied, "They say he will return to his farm. If he does that," said the King of England, "he will be the greatest man in the world." Washington did, and to many he was. In Burma and throughout the world, Aung San Suu Kyi has earned a similar greatness as a duly elected but denied president who has lived her commitment to human rights through steadfast and personal sacrifice. In President Thein Sein, she now has a government partner in securing the rights and human dignity of their fellow citizens. As they know better than anyone, Burma is a country whose future depends on meaningful societal reconciliation. Not only to overcome the decades of abusive military rule, but to ensure that all the people of Burma, whatever their ethnicities, are treated as equal. In remarks 3 days ago at the U.S. Institute of Peace in Washington, D.C., Aung San Suu Kyi said this: "There are still hundreds of political prisoners in Burma today. They will all have to be freed. If you talk about genuine democratization, there should not be a single political prisoner in Burma. There should be no prisoners of conscience, because in a genuine democracy, people should be able to act in accordance with their conscience so long as they're not infringing on the rights of others." She also said, "Human rights and the rule of law, these cannot be ignored in Burma. And that, I think," she said, "has to be accepted by all the responsible parties. To ignore either human rights or the rule of law, or to ignore human rights and pretend that rule of law is a different matter, won't work. Nor will it work the other way around," she said. "You cannot say that we must have the rule of law, but human rights is something we will think about later. These two have to go together," she said. Reconciliation. Let me talk a little bit about reconciliation. Reconciliation is a complex, multifaceted, nuanced subject, linked both to the healing of victims and the telling of truths about international crimes, which together form the basis of a society moving beyond upheaval and ruptures. It has been claimed that providing a sense of justice through prosecutions for international crimes can facilitate societal reconciliation and provide the preconditions for a durable peace. This notion is often expressed in the aphorism, "No peace without justice." Evidence from Latin America, where policies of amnesty were rife in the 1970s, but where prosecutions have continuously been demanded and recently have begun to occur, provides some support for that position. The UN Security Council provided significant support for the interconnection of peace and justice when it determined in the situations in the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda that prosecutions would assist in reconciliation and a return to peace in those areas. Perhaps the strongest statement of support for the link between criminal justice and peace in the former Yugoslavia came in the decision of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the ICTY, in the Plavšić case. Biljana Plavšić was a co-president of the Republika Srpska during 1992. She surrendered to the ICTY and pleaded guilty to crimes against humanity, expressing her remorse and stating that in doing so she wished to, quote, offer some consolation to the innocent victims, Muslim, Croat, and Serb, of the war. In sentencing her to 11 years imprisonment, the tribunal noted, quote, acknowledgement and full disclosure of serious crimes are very important when establishing the truth in relation to such crimes. This, together with acceptance of responsibility for the committed wrongs, will promote reconciliation. Those who doubt that international criminal law promotes peace and reconciliation believe that requiring prosecutions will cause more bloodshed, with parties to conflicts fighting to the end. On the other hand, there is anecdotal evidence that the International Criminal Court, indictments and prosecutions since the court began operations in 2002, have had a deterrent effect in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It is still too early to say whether the optimists or the pessimists are correct. It is worth noting that 121 states parties to the Rome Statute have affirmed that the commission of international crimes threatens the, quote, peace, security, and well-being of the world. It is also important to note that the UN Security Council has the authority directly to affect the ambivalent relationship between international criminal justice and peace by using its power to restore and maintain international peace and security under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, by deciding not only to refer a situation to the International Criminal Court, but also to defer an ICC prosecution if circumstances warrant. Closely related to the dichotomy and interplay of international criminal justice and peace and reconciliation are the subjects of amnesty and truth commissions. Those who speak in favor of granting amnesties to advance reconciliation claim that amnesties are necessary to bring an end to conflicts, and that to insist on anything more is to condemn others to death or serious human rights violations as combatants, and others will refuse to relinquish their weapons of power without a promise of amnesty. Others see the grant of amnesties as giving in to blackmail, fostering a culture of impunity that denies retribution to criminals and denies justice to untold thousands of massacred and suffering human beings, and encouraging the commission of future crimes. Granting amnesties, therefore, is considered by its opponents to undermine the deterrent function of international criminal law and to represent an ugly political compromise. Sometimes this compromise is also seen as one between powerful elites who bargain away the rights of victims with little regard for their human dignity. Conversely, its proponents, especially the perpetrators of crime, urge that amnesties promote reconciliation between previously antagonistic parties and allow populations to move on from the past. Opponents of amnesty respond by arguing that, and I quote, "It is difficult to imagine how a society can liberate itself from a past in which impunity, lawlessness, and abuse of power have prevailed, unless respect for the basic principle of individual criminal responsibility is resurrected." Perhaps the one thing that everyone can agree to in this debate is that reconciliation is not a simple notion. For one example, while it is often assumed that reconciliation is a social process, it is at least as much an individual one between victim and perpetrator. Also, it must be acknowledged that reconciliation and its spiritual partner, forgiveness, often draw on religious notions that are not necessarily universal. Indeed, some question the philosophical appropriateness of forgiveness for horrific and unspeakable human conduct. What is certain is that reconciliation, like friendship, cannot be forced upon people. And some victims will not wish to be reconciled with their persecutors, particularly in the absence of genuine remorse. With forgiveness, there's also the possibility of forgetfulness, in particular of victims. The term amnesty, as is often pointed out, shares a common Latin root, amnestia, with forgetfulness, and the word is amnesia. With this comes the risk of increased denial or the minimization of horrific international crimes. In part because of the possibility that amnesties will lead to forgetfulness or denial, one of the activities that often accompanies them is the setting up of a truth commission. A truth commission, many of you probably know, is often an alternative to prosecution, especially where the secret nature of many of the offenses makes it difficult, if not impossible, to prove the relevant criminal standard in court. The idea behind many truth commissions is that people will be more willing to tell the truth about their criminal activities if they don't have to stand trial. This can be important, for example, when people who have disappeared and relatives of victims do not know the fate of family members. Truth commissions can also enable more victims to tell their story than is possible in court, where there are procedural and evidentiary rule restrictions. One of the main purposes of truth commissions is to acknowledge the harm that was done to the victims in an official report, setting out the violations of rights. The South African Truth and Reconciliation Report named names of alleged perpetrators, while the Argentinian Commission did not have the authority to do so. There can be other possible limitations on truth commissions and their reports. The South African Commission, for example, only had the mandate to deal with political violence. It could not deal with issues such as land dispossessions, forcible transfers, and other aspects of apartheid. Nor could it deal with the use and abuse of the legal and political system in creating and maintaining the apartheid system. As a result, it could only tell part of the story of apartheid. Importantly, as occurred in South Africa as part of the attempt to promote reconciliation and help provide victims with a form of healing, victims were given the opportunity to attend and speak and discuss the revelations made by the perpetrators. Much of the utility of a truth commission depends on the attitude and cooperation of the perpetrators and on whether the engagement they give to the process is full or combative and grudging. Burma. Burma can look to several historical and relevant examples of national reconciliation on its own path. One example, which I've just described, is that of South Africa after the fall of apartheid, when President de Klerk and Nelson Mandela restored human rights for all in South Africa. And with justice for all rendered impossible by the sheer vastness of evil wrought under apartheid, Archbishop Desmond Tutu led the nation toward reconciliation through confession and forgiveness. The civil rights movement in the United States is another example. A long oppressed and exploited minority, led primarily by the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., rendered the self-evident truth of human equality all the more evident through, as Dr. King described it, their, quote, unearned, redemptive suffering. These and other examples demonstrate that reconciliation, in fact, is not a destination, but an evolution. Dr. King famously observed that, quote, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Neither South Africa, nor the United States, nor Burma, nor any nation can arrive at justice. The best we can do is to follow that arc. And as the late Senator Kennedy liked to say, keep our compass true. And so back to the question that begs for an answer. What is the role of the justice system in securing reconciliation? For while struggles and sacrifice have characterized the pursuit of justice throughout human history, that pursuit seeks an end at which justice, if not perfect, is at least accessible, predictable, and fundamentally fair, and at which revenge and violence can no longer be deemed options for settling conflict. Burma's answer to this question will determine the future of its people. For reconciliation's ultimate test, in my view, is obsolescence, meaning that the institutions erected following reconciliation will be able to dispense justice in a way that protects and promotes human rights, and thereby fulfills reconciliation's essential purpose of acknowledging past wrongs and establishing a durable peace. As Aung San Suu Kyi has wisely counseled, quote, where there is no justice, there can be no secure peace. And the true measure of the justice of a system is the amount of protection it guarantees to the weakest. As of this month, nearly 170 countries have ratified or acceded to the covenant. Burma is not yet committed to doing so. A proof of Burma's commitment to these principles, as it is for countries that have ratified the covenant, is in the honoring of those principles, not merely in the committing to do so. This new chapter for the people of Burma brings both an historic opportunity and a moral obligation to enact and effectuate Burma's commitment to these principles, and thereby rejoin the international legal community, the International Criminal Court. As Burma rejoins the international community, its commitment should extend, I respectfully suggest, to international criminal justice, specifically to acceding to the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. Just as Tunisia, where the Arab awakening was ignited, did when one of the first acts of the new government was to ratify the Rome Statute that created the ICC, Burma can send a similarly strong and clear message that it is joining the international community in the fullest sense. The ICC was born of the dual conviction that first, impunity for mass atrocities, the kinds of horrific acts for which reconciliation has been necessary, such as genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, should no longer be possible in the modern world. And that second, by eliminating impunity for perpetrators of atrocities, future atrocities will be deterred. The ICC and the ad hoc special tribunals that have been at work for the last 15 years have an important role in dealing with the complex questions raised by reconciliation in conflict and post-conflict zones. The rapid emergence and development of international criminal law has made the peace versus justice debate one of the most important conversations now occurring in the international community. And the crux of the debate is the level of emphasis and deference to be given to traditional diplomacy versus that given to criminal justice. While diplomacy and justice are not mutually exclusive, we should recall the words again of Dr. King, who said that, quote, true peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice. Whether through diplomacy or prosecution or both, accountability for mass atrocities must occur. Without it, the real risk is creating a fragile peace that is only temporary and destructible. Today, 121 nations have submitted to the ICC's jurisdiction by ratifying the Rome Statute, which established the court in 1998 and entered into force in 2002. While I urge Burma to join these nations, I regret that the United States has not yet done so, nor has China or Russia. Nevertheless, as the Obama administration is now demonstrating, there's much that the U.S. can do and should do to promote the ICC's vital mandate. And as a former president of the American Bar Association and now chair of the ABA Center for Human Rights, I am pleased to inform you that the legal profession in the United States, led by the ABA through its new ICC project, has undertaken a major initiative to facilitate greater U.S. government engagement and cooperation and support of the ICC. Let me briefly describe what this project is all about. In 1978, the American Bar Association House of Delegates, a 550-member body, adopted the first policy urging the creation of an international criminal tribunal. 20 years later, the ABA was among the key NGOs involved in developing the Rome Statute. Since 1998, the ABA has been calling for the U.S. to accede to the jurisdiction of the ICC, and until that happens, for meaningful U.S. engagement with and support for the court. To that end, 9 months ago, the ABA Center for Human Rights, through its chair, entered into discussions with the leaders of the International Criminal Court. The presidency, the registry, and the office of the prosecutor are the heads of the three organs of the ICC. I led those discussions on behalf of the ABA. I traveled to The Hague, we met in New York, and as I explained to those three leaders of the court, the initiative that we had in mind was intended to address not only the support given by so many in the United States, but the constructive criticisms being made by those same experts in the U.S. and around the world. In early July, I spent several days at The Hague, again with the leaders, discussing the terms of a memorandum of understanding between the court and the ABA. on how we might, in the U.S., judges, prosecutors, lawyers, share best practices and help to train staff, administrative staff, and staff lawyers at The Hague under the auspices of a consortium of the ABA and international partners, by judges from both the common law tradition and civil law tradition, prosecutors, victims counsel, during the coming 24 months. And this coming Wednesday, I will fly again to The Hague for discussions regarding the implementation of this project, which is beginning in the middle of October. We believe that the ABA project can foster greater U.S. engagement and cooperation with the ICC in 3 ways. First, we will promote practitioner engagement and training. The project will marshal the full resources of the 400,000-member ABA and the ABA's team of international partners to help train and share best practices with the court to improve the efficiency of the court and the effectiveness of the court, 2 of the criticisms that have been leveled at the ICC. We will have legal exchange missions to the U.S. by international lawyers and judges, and to The Hague by U.S. lawyers and judges. Second, the project will facilitate direct engagement among and between U.S. and ICC officials. The project will establish opportunities and venues for ongoing candid dialogue and debate among ICC officials, U.S. policymakers, and stakeholders. The objective of these forums and exchanges is to facilitate public and private meetings, which we hope will lead to greater mutual trust and understanding of what the role of the court is. And third, the ABA, as it does in so many issues of importance, will advocate for the ICC publicly and before U.S. legislative and executive branches. To guide the project's efforts and to maximize its impact, the ABA Center is assembling a bipartisan, Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals, on a board of advisors that already has 14 people. They are eminent U.S. and international experts on international criminal law and leaders of diplomacy and advocacy. The individuals who have agreed to serve to date include some names that will be familiar to you. The Honorable Sandra Day O'Connor, the Honorable Patricia Wald, the Honorable Thomas Bergenthal, the Honorable Philippe Kirsch of Canada, the Honorable Gabrielle Kirk MacDonald, Ambassador David Sheffer, Ambassador Thomas Graham, Ambassador Thomas Siebert, UN Ambassador Hans Corell, Professor David Crane, who was the first prosecutor of the Sierra Leone Special Court, Professor Sharif Bassioni, who was the principal drafter of the Rome Statute, William H. Taft IV, who was the advisor to the State Department, legal advisor to the State Department in the Bush administration. Additional individuals will be invited to serve as advisors. The ICC project will say to those in the United States who may fear or doubt the ICC due to lack of knowledge or other reasons, justice, peace, and reconciliation. Each of us in this room, in our own ways and abilities, is obliged to seek and facilitate reconciliation, justice, and peace, in whichever ways our minds and hearts and opportunities lead us. And this obligation belongs no less to human institutions, including governments, than to the individual human beings who comprise and lead them. Aung San Suu Kyi perhaps said it best in her Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech, which, as you heard, she delivered as a free woman in June of this year, 21 years after she was awarded the prize. She said this: "Absolute peace in our world is an unattainable goal. but it is one towards which we must continue to journey. Our eyes fixed on it as a traveler in a desert fixes his eyes on the one guiding star that will lead him to salvation. Even if we do not achieve perfect peace on earth, she said, because perfect peace is not of this earth. Common endeavors to gain peace will unite individuals and nations in trust and friendship to help to make our human community safer and kinder. I congratulate Aung San Suu Kyi and President Thein Sein on receiving the inaugural Tran Nhan Tong Reconciliation Prize. I wish them success in the important and difficult work that lies ahead of them on behalf of and in protection of the people of Burma. And I thank you for your kind attention.